president's legal team is hoping to get answers from him as soon as today about next steps in the Russia investigation. Of course, the key question, is he going to sit down for an interview with Mueller's team? The president's lawyers are preparing to meet with Mueller's team anytime between now and next week, trying to negotiate the terms of what a sit-down would even look like with the president. The president has said he wants to do this interview. Sources tell CNN, though, most of his lawyers are very skeptical about whether he should. Abby Phillip is at the White House with more. Good morning.
Well, good morning, Poppy. As the president was flying back from Singapore from that meeting with Kim Jong-un, he was working the phones, including talking to his lawyers about what's next with this Russia probe. Now, his attorneys are hoping to have a quiet moment with the president now that that summit is over with to talk about the strategy to move forward, including about whether or not the president should sit down for an interview with Robert Mueller and what kind of concessions they want Mueller to give in order to secure that interview. Take a listen to what Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, had to say about those deliberations.
All of us know he shouldn't testify unless we get everything we want and he wants. But we should get it done in the next week or two. Get the decision done.
Okay.
Which means then we go to battling over a subpoena or getting him ready for a small, tailored, limited interview.
Now, the president's lawyers are scheduled to meet with Mueller at some point in the next week or so. And as you know, the lawyers remain concerned that the president could find himself in a situation where he perjures himself wittingly or unwittingly in the context of an interview with the special counsel. Poppy.
Yeah, Abby Phillip, appreciate the reporting at the White House. All right, joining me now, CNN legal analyst Shan Wu. Shan, there's a lot to go through here. What do you make of the fact that I don't know if it's just publicly they're not on the same page, but at least, and privately they are, but the fact that the lawyers don't want the president to do this sit down and the president keeps saying he does. Where does this end up?
Well, I think with many situations like this, with this president, there probably genuinely is a disagreement because they can't get on the same page in terms of their messaging. I think his lawyers are correct in being very cautious about wanting him to sit down. You need to spend an enormous amount of time preparing with your client for a sit-down like that.
Sure.
I think their best move here is they should try to prepare the president, but they really need to focus on setting the boundaries of what that interview is going to encompass. That's a much safer move for them than trying to rely on the traditional method of preparing a client.
We've also learned that the president's former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, has gotten rid of some of his lawyers. He's looking for new legal representation, specifically lawyers with a lot of experience dealing with the Southern District of New York. A, what is your read on that and what that indicates? And B, just your reaction to Rudy Giuliani, who said, I checked last night and he's not cooperating, because there'd been reporting that he was going to cooperate and plea. And Giuliani says, no, he's not cooperating because the president did nothing wrong. We're very comfortable if he cooperates. There's nothing there.
It's a little bit hard to discern what's really going on with the change in legal representation. From my own experience in the Gates case, that can be a very complex and ethical landmine for the lawyers. So I would expect for the actual lawyers involved in it, you're going to pretty much hear silence. Not true for Giuliani, of course. He's weighing in with his own version of it. I would take that with a grain of salt. I mean, I don't really know how he knows that. If the lawyers on behalf of Cohen have talked to the prosecutors, they wouldn't necessarily be telling him that at this point.
Let's talk about Mr. Horowitz, the Inspector General, who has penned this long report that is going to come out this afternoon about how the DOJ and FBI handled the Hillary Clinton email probe, whether it was politically motivated, what was done right, what was done incorrectly. He is someone who you worked with back in the day. You worked with him at the DOJ. He has been roundly praised by Republicans like Oversight Chairman Trey Gowdy, like Congressman Elijah Cummings on the left. What can you tell us about him?
He is an excellent lawyer, good background as a prosecutor. He's very, very meticulous. I remember one anecdote about him that he used to come to these meetings when he was chief of staff to the criminal division with only a single note card for notes. So obviously very good memory, very thorough. And he's really one of the best IGs, really. I've known a lot of the IGs and watched their practice. And he's very just focused on doing a very rigorous comprehensive job, and he's not going to be swayed by anybody else's timetable or anybody else's agenda.
Right. And in the Fast and Furious case during the Obama administration, the report on the fallout from that, he even gained a lot of credit from members of Congress by recusing himself, Shan, right, from parts of that where he said, look, I have conflicts of interest. I'm going to have other members of my team deal with these parts of this. And that gained him a lot of credibility.
Absolutely. I think that shows the sort of high ethical duty that he has, and that's exactly what an Inspector General's duty ought to be. So I'm looking forward to seeing the report. I think it will be very enlightening.
Shan, we appreciate it. Nice to have you this morning.
Good to see you.
All right, ahead for us. Coming up, is it the grand old party or the party of Trump? A new warning overnight from the chair of the RNC that those who don't embrace the president will be making a big mistake. Also, we're moments away from the opening bell on Wall Street. This morning, U.S. stocks set to open higher after dipping yesterday as the Fed hiked interest rates and also hinted that faster hikes are on the way. Well, this morning, North Korean state media has just debuted some new footage that was shot during the Trump-Kim summit in Singapore. Take a look at this. Okay, so the president extends his hand to this North Korean general. The general responds with a salute. The president returns the salute, and then both men shake hands. Why is this significant? Our military analyst, former Rear Admiral John Kirby, is back with me. Why is this so striking?
It's so striking because it was, released by North Korean state TV, which means they can see a propaganda value here, and this is basically them showing the level of deference and respect that Trump has paid to them and to their military leaders. It was an inappropriate thing for him to do from a protocol perspective, but now he's played right into the North's propaganda about their legitimacy on the world stage.
So what should he have done?
He should have just nodded his head when the general saluted and reached out his hand and did a handshake. That's the appropriate thing. Look, he's the commander-in-chief. He doesn't even salute his own generals. They salute him. That's the way it works. And you certainly don't do it with leaders of foreign militaries, and most certainly don't do it with the leaders of foreign militaries of an adversary nation.
Look, in the 48 hours since this summit, he has been incredibly flattering and complimentary of Kim Jong-un. He has equivocated when asked by Fox News, well, what about the human rights atrocities? What about the execution of his own people? And now this. Are you surprised?
I wish I could say I was surprised, Poppy. I'm not. He is on a charm offensive of his own, a charm offensive that I think is being orchestrated to some degree by President Xi and President Moon Jae-in of South Korea, who want to revert to the Sunshine Policy to show deference to the North, so to get them to open up at the negotiating table. And this is just another ham-fisted Trump way of trying to do that.
The question is, does it help us get to the end goal? Does it help towards denuclearization, right?
Well, that remains to be seen, Poppy. I mean, look, playing devil's advocate, there's a logic here that, his own charm offensive might, in fact, lead to the North loosening up a little bit and making some big changes over time. And I think we just have to wait and see if that pans out. But I would remind your viewers that the Sunshine Policy in the past has not worked.
Hasn't worked.
I'm all for engagement and discussion, but I do think that President Trump is going overboard here.
Admiral Kirby, appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. Also this morning, President Trump touting the strength of the party, the Republican Party. He writes, the Republican Party is starting to show very big numbers. Results are speaking loudly. North Korea and our greatest economy are leading the way. This comes after the head of the Republican National Committee overnight warned anyone that is not embracing the president's policies. With me now, CNN senior political analyst Ron Brownstein. So we'll get to that tweet from Ron McDaniel in a moment. Good morning to you. But let me ask you about something that's getting a lot of attention within the president's own party, from someone that the president has endorsed and supported. That is the Virginia Senate candidate, Corey Stewart, on with Chris Cuomo last night, talking about his history associating with white supremacists like Jason Kessler, who organized the Charlottesville march in which Heather Heyer died. Also, Paul Nealon, an outspoken anti-Semite who at one point in time, Corey Stewart called his personal hero. He has since disavowed him. Here's the exchange between Stewart and Chris Cuomo.
You haven't denied a single fact that I've suggested, Mr. Stewart. Do you know that? Did you take his endorsement, Mr. Hines? Yes or no? Did you take it?
I take support from whoever wants to give it to me. That doesn't mean I support their views.
No, Matt.
That does not mean I support their views.
So you think that you can take the support of somebody?
Anything to do with anybody who's racist or bigoted or anti-Semitic?
Hold on a second.
I just told you I'm the world's foremost expert on what I believe, and I don't believe any of those things that you're trying to accuse me of.
I take support from whomever gives it. This is someone the president congratulated on his primary victory this week. What does this mean for the party?
Well, look, it's an example of lines that used to be very bright becoming suddenly blurry in terms of isolating those sorts of extremist white nationalist voices outside of the mainstream of American politics. They are now finding a home, in some cases, on the edges of the Republican coalition. I mean, Stewart's victory is a reflection of the changes in the party that Donald Trump himself has benefited from, in terms of the growing strength of the more blue collar, the non-urban, the voters who are the most uneasy with the way America is changing.
But
and
Ron,
we've seen
is
that play out.
Is it fair to say it's reflective of the party? Because, I mean, you and I both spent a lot of time in Trump country, and none of the people that I've interviewed that are big supporters of the president would be comfortable at all with anti-Semitic views or actions.
What is happening, though, in Virginia, and through the president's own words, in Virginia, of very fine people, is, as I said, these bright lines are getting blurry. It doesn't mean that everyone in the Republican coalition by any means accepts these views. They are finding it harder, though, to draw that line and say this is clearly beyond the pale, because under Trump, the president is making arguments along a continuum that essentially it started with rapists and murderers coming down, from coming down the escalator on the first day, to the way he talks about immigrants as animals, the MS-13 as animals. Now
he was talking about the gang.
I say he was talking about MS-13 as animals,
MS-13.
As animals. So there is a continuum here that is making it harder, I think, to draw the line as unequivocally as they used to.
So to your point, we heard from Republican Senator. Republican Tennessee Senator Bob Corker yesterday, and he said, I had a brain freeze there for a moment, and he said this is cult-like behavior. Listen to this.
Yeah. We're in a strange place. I mean, it's almost, it's becoming a cultish thing, isn't it? It's not a good place for any party to end up with a cult-like situation as it relates to a president that happens to be purportedly of the same party.
Okay, notable that he said purportedly the president is of the Republican Party, okay?
Interesting.
But also, we should note that he's not running again, and a large reason why he was facing a tough primary challenge if he did run again is because of how critical he was of the president. But given those things, does hearing something like this from a Republican sitting senator move the needle at all?
Well, look, I think it is Donald Trump's party now, but that is as much by default as by knockout. I mean, as we said, clearly one of the reasons Trump is in such a strong position inside the Republican Party is because it reflects its evolution into a more blue-collar, populist party that is animated by dislike of elites of all sorts. But another big reason for it is because those in the Republican Party who have objections to his vision, for example, on foreign policy, on abandoning or questioning the American alliances since World War II, on trade, on immigration, they have failed to offer an alternative vision or to really provide any kind of message to the Republican coalition that there is another way. And so for Bob Corker to kind of say, well, it's become a cult in part because those who have doubts, like Corker and Flake and Lindsey Graham and others, have not found the will to offer any alternative to the party.
And look, the president's polling so strong in his own party, 87% support him. Thank you.
Real quick, still a potential for more of those white-collar Republicans to respond to another vision. He only won 1/3 of them during the primaries, and many of them are conflicted about Donald Trump.
Nice to have you here, Ron. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
This morning, the White House is warning U.S. senators not to overstep their authority as the Senate considers a vote to block the president's decision to ease sanctions on Chinese tech giant ZTE. Here's a refresher on why this matters so much. ZTE had been banned from buying American technology after it violated U.S. sanctions by doing business with North Korea and Iran. Then a 2012 congressional report found ZTE was a security threat because of its efforts to extract sensitive information from American companies. Needless to say, this is serious stuff. Joining me now is Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland. Senator, nice to have you.
Poppy, great to be with you.
You've been very outspoken about your opposition to the deal that the Commerce Department struck. It fines ZTE $1 billion. It makes them put $400 million in escrow should they violate sanctions again. Your Republican counterpart, Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, said, quote, the only fitting punishment would be to put ZTE out of business in the United States. Is he right?
He is right, and that's why I teamed up with him to offer the amendment, which is now included in what we call the manager's package, and I'm confident that that's going to pass the United States Senate in the coming week. Look, the Commerce Department had the right penalty back in April when they announced that because ZTE had not only violated the U.S. sanctions policy against North Korea and Iran once, but they did it repeatedly, and then when they were caught, they said they were going to come clean, and instead they engaged in a big cover-up and did it again. That's why the Commerce Department did what it did, and that would be the penalty today, except for the fact that President Trump then tweeted out that he wanted to help ZTE and help save jobs in China. And so
here's what,
go ahead.
Here's what the
but
White
our
House
view is
says
we should
is the
stick with the original penalty.
And the view of the White House is this. The view of the White House from Hogan Gidley yesterday is that they think this deal ensures that ZTE pays a pretty penny, right? $1 billion plus $400 million in escrow for this violation. But they say that it also prevents harm to American companies and their suppliers. And as you know, ZTE buys products from the likes of Qualcomm, Broadcom, Intel, and a lot of other smaller optical companies. And you've got companies, just an example, right? In Massachusetts, you've got a company named Acacia. They sold about $116 million worth of goods to ZTE last year. That's about 30% of their annual revenue. So understanding that these companies aren't in your district, aren't in your state, do you have any concerns about the negative impact on U.S. businesses as a result of ZTE going out of business?
I always think we need to take into account the impact on U.S. businesses, but I think we most of all have to look out for U.S. national security interests. And as you laid out in your remarks there, way back in 2012, the House Intelligence Committee, after getting testimony from national security experts, concluded on a bipartisan basis that ZTE and Huawei, another Chinese telecommunications company, pose a threat, a risk to U.S. national security. And that hasn't changed. In fact, as recently as February, you had the director of the FBI, the head of the CIA, all the other intelligence folks say it's a bad idea to allow ZTE or Huawei to be doing business in the United States. The Federal Trade Commission has recommended that U.S. telecom companies not do any business with ZTE. So this is a national security issue, which is why another part of the amendment that Senator Cotton and I proposed would prohibit U.S. government agencies from purchasing phones or equipment from ZTE.
Let me ask you about North Korea. In the wake of the summit that President Trump had with Kim Jong-un in Singapore, do you believe that America, Senator, is safer today from the North Korean threat than it was on Monday?
I do not believe that the threat has changed, and here's why. Because North Korea still has the same nuclear arsenal, both in terms of nuclear weapons and missiles, that it had 48 hours ago. Now, of course, it's a good thing that the temperature has decreased. Of course, the temperature rose largely because of what President Trump and Kim Jong-un had done previously. But the fact remains that their arsenal has not changed one bit. And here's what we also know, that North Korea achieved two of its goals. North Korean leaders have wanted for a very long time to have a summit meeting with the President of the United States. They got that. They got a big photo op. They got the President of the United States praising them, and they got an end to a suspension of U.S. joint military exercises. We've got a lot of vague possible commitments, and we have no timeline for when they're going to be implemented.
Senator, before you go, I do want to get your take on the IG report that's set to come out today on the Hillary Clinton email probe this afternoon. Here's what former Utah Republican Congressman Jason Chaffetz said about this report ahead of it. Quote, Republicans and Democrats alike really need to take to heart whatever it is that he finds, even if it doesn't fit our political agendas. People will spin and throw political barbs, but if you read the actual text, my gut is that it's the truth. Do you agree with him that even if this looks bad, say, for Hillary Clinton, for Democrats, for James Comey, that Democrats, Republicans alike, should take it as fact, not try to spin it?
Well, we should certainly look at the facts. We should certainly find out what's in this report. I'm looking forward to seeing what's in the report. But Republicans have already been spinning it in this way. They've been trying to argue that if there's any misconduct shown in the Hillary Clinton email investigation, that somehow that should taint the Mueller investigation. The Mueller investigation is a completely independent investigation and has nothing to do with that original email investigation. So let's find out what this report says about the Clinton email investigation, but let's not try to, quote, spin this to undermine the very important independent Mueller investigation.
Senator Chris Van Hollen, it's nice to have you here. Thanks for the time.
It's good to be here. Thanks.
Welcome back. I'm Poppy Harlow in New York, and a new study shows the rate at which ice is melting in Antarctica has tripled in the last 6 years. This is a team of 80 scientists that came to this conclusion, and their study argues that 200 billion tons of ice is now pouring into the oceans. Let's go to our meteorologist, Chad Myers, with more. What do you make of the study, and what does it mean for the American cities that are most at risk because of rising sea levels?
We know that the sea level rise rate has gone up worldwide, but truly didn't know where it was all coming from until this study came out. And we know that a lot of it is coming from West Antarctica. East Antarctica is melting, but not at the rate that West Antarctica is. We're losing drastically, we're losing ice off of that, melting into the ocean. Much of it from under the glacial sheets because the water is warmer, melting the ice from below. But it's the drop-off that's most concerning. Between 1992 and about 2012, we were losing 76 billion tons a year. The last few years, 219 billion tons. Now, there are big pluses and minuses there, and even if you put plus on the one side, minus on the other, you still get a significant rate rise. So since 1900, the ocean has gone up 7.7 inches. But since 1990, the ocean has gone up 2.6 inches. So it's that rate of how quickly it's going up that we're most concerned about, and that's the sea level rise problem that we're facing here across the globe.
Yeah, and you think about, those cities along the coast at sea level, a lot of major concerns, Florida and the like. Thank you, Chad. Appreciate it. Coming up, defending a dictator, President Trump calls Kim Jong-un a tough guy who may have done some bad things, but then the president adds, so have a lot of other people. Reaction to that ahead. Top of the hour, I'm Poppy Harlow in New York. So glad you're with us this morning. Many questions still unanswered in the wake of President Trump's historic meeting with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. But today it's more clear the president is a defender of the autocratic leader he once called Little Rocket Man. Listen to this exchange between Fox News anchor Bret Baier and the president on Air Force One.
You call people sometimes killers. He is a killer. I mean, he's clearly executing people.
He's a tough guy. Hey, when you take over a country with tough people, and you take it over from your father, I don't care who you are, what you are, how much of an advantage you have. If you can do that at 27 years old, that's 1 in 10,000 that could do that. So he's a very smart guy. He's a great negotiator. But I think we understand each other.
But he's still done some really bad things.
Yeah, but so have a lot of other people done some really bad things. I mean, I could go through a lot of nations where a lot of bad things were done. Now, look, with all of that being said, the answer is yes.
All right. Also this morning, the words that you just heard, those words are not the only measure of what seems to be the president's somewhat deference to the Kim regime. Take a look at this video. This is video playing right now in North Korean state media. It shows President Trump saluting a North Korean general. We're going to get to Barbara Starr at the Pentagon in a moment with why that is significant. And before that, let's go to the State Department. Michelle Kaczynski is with us. Michelle, your thoughts on the exchange that we just heard between the president and Bret Baier?
This is not just him saying we can get along, or I think we can have a good relationship, or he was polite to me. This is him complimenting Kim Jong-un, seeming to make excuses for him and saying that other people have done bad things too, where here is a dictator that only months ago sent home a young American student in a coma to die. Somebody who just last year had his country added back to the list of state sponsors of terror because he murdered his half-brother with a nerve agent on foreign soil. So you see criticism in the last few days for U.S. allies like the Prime Minister of Canada, who Trump called weak and dishonest, but none of that for Kim Jong-un. And it is possible that the president starts to say these things and he goes too far without intending to seem like he thinks Kim Jong-un is a hell of a guy. And there's an argument to be made among Trump's supporters that he's just trying to set the conditions for a deal, that he's in the midst of deal making here. But there's also a big argument that as nice as Trump feels he needs to be behind closed doors with Kim Jong-un, is it really necessary to go in front of the American people and the world and compliment this guy and seem like you're making excuses for not just bad behavior, but for murder? Poppy.
Michelle Kaczynski at the State Department, thank you for that. And now to the Pentagon, Barbara Starr is there. Barbara, just talk me through this video, and let's play it, guys, while Barbara and I are talking, just so people can see this, and why it is so significant that the president would salute a North Korean general.
Well, let's keep looking at the video. What you see is this North Korean general beginning this exchange by raising his hand and saluting the President of the United States, and Mr. Trump then returning that salute. We do not know if the North Korean was ordered by his own regime to salute the President, but the President made what is a judgment call. It is his decision about who and when he chooses to salute anyone. So he has, the bottom line is he's given the North Koreans a video opportunity here that they're continuing to show on their broadcast channels of the President of the United States saluting North Korea. What does that mean? It means the President of the United States giving a military gesture of respect to a nation that is on the State Department's list of, you know, terror nations. It doesn't get more odd than that. Let's just... Sorry, Poppy?
I was just going to say he did reach out the president to try to shake the hand first. And then when he was saluted, he saluted back.
That's right. But what's really, I think, so significant here is for everyone to understand what it means for a president, any president of the United States. There's no regulations about a president saluting. It actually goes back to Ronald Reagan's time when he began the custom by saluting the Marines on the helicopter on the south lawn of the White House, and presidents over time have adopted that custom. They salute U.S. military personnel. They have saluted foreign military personnel, but no president's really been in the position Mr. Trump was to make that judgment call about saluting what is an adversary nation. And, you know, it's his judgment call that he made. People are going to have to decide for themselves. One can suppose whether they agree with it, whether it was a good idea. What offense would the North Koreans have taken if Mr. Trump had not returned that gesture? It doesn't catch military people here at the Pentagon by complete surprise because it is sort of that custom and tradition. I think it catches a lot of people by surprise because it's North Korea.
Absolutely. Barbara Starr at the Pentagon, thank you for that reporting. Let's get some analysis of this with our military analyst and retired Rear Admiral John Kirby. So let's begin with the video, Admiral. And you heard Barbara lay out exactly what this was. This was a judgment call from the president. And when you talk about preparing for a summit, it's not just about the words that are exchanged or any concessions that may be made. It's also about the body language. It's also about, you know, what you do in respect or deference and what you withhold and what you don't do with an adversarial regime. What do you make of this?
You know, absolutely, Poppy. And this is all about, a lot of summitry is about optics and body language. And if you remember when President Obama went down to Cuba, you know, there was all this debate and churn about whether he was going to raise his hands with, you know, with Castro. And of course, he didn't do that. He refused to do that. I mean, it matters. This stuff matters, and it particularly matters to North Korea because one of the things they really wanted out of this summit was legitimacy on the world stage. They've been wanting this kind of meeting for decades, and they finally got it. And so it's no surprise to me that on North Korean state TV, they're showing this video over and over again because it shows the deference and the respect that they wanted to get out of the United States.
So you couple that with the language that the president used in this Bret Baier Fox News interview about Kim Jong-un. I mean, Bret Baier teed it up for him to condemn these executions, to condemn these human rights atrocities twice. and the president didn't do it.
Yeah, Brett was really trying to lead him there.
Republican Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, who has spoken out against the president when he disagrees with the president, just told Armando Raju, look, I think the president's trying to negotiate. I think anyone who has intellect above a single-cell organism understands that when you're trying to negotiate, he's funny, you're trying to negotiate a deal, you don't walk in and slap your opponent and call him an ignorant slut. Those are his words. What do you think?
Yeah, well, look, there is a logic here that that Trump is on a charm offensive of his own, that he is showing deference and respect to North Korea in the hopes that they'll open up. This is the central tenet of the Sunshine Policy, that if you just be nice to North Korea and you give them some concessions. And look, I think also, look, when Trump used the word war games and provocative the other day, that was a sign of deference and respect. It's this idea that you can open these guys up over time with kindness. Now, look, the Sunshine Policy just hasn't worked in the past. I'm all about engaging, but it has a very checkered history of success, so we'll have to see where it goes. I do think, though, that when you're talking about North Korea, as Barbara pointed, this is a special case. This is the world's most brutal dictatorship, and it's not a problem for the United States president to, in the same breath as he says, I want to reach out and I want to talk and we want to negotiate, to also say, but you've got to change your behavior, with respect to human rights.
Look, and it's not just that he said this about Kim Jong-un. He's said this about Putin, when being asked about Putin being a killer, about Duterte, the dictator, murderous dictator in the Philippines. So, thank you, Admiral. Appreciate you being here very, very much.